Hello, welcome back. We are in chapter 26. We're going to do 26 and 27 today. And if you've kind of read ahead and you thought, well, wait a minute, 26 is really long. We're going to skip most of the census part, not because it's not important, but because it's not important to our study, what we're trying to do right here. I do want you to read it. The names matter. You will see names later on in the Bible that you're going to see in this census. We read through a couple going into numbers. So I'm not going to confuse everybody by trying to do that again. So this is Numbers chapter 26, and I'm going to read from the Complete Jewish Bible, just the first few verses to kind of give us some context, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's in there. If this is your first video, go back to the beginning. You get a little bit of context, and some of this will make a lot more sense. So send me your questions and comments, and we'll talk about them. I'm sure everybody else wants to know too. So let's jump right in. Adonai said to Moshe and Eleazar, the son of Aaron the Cohen, take a census of the entire assembly of the people of Israel, 20 years old and over, by their ancestral clans, all who are subject to military service in Israel. Moshe and Eleazar the Cohen spoke with them on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from the Jericho, explaining, those 20 years old and over who came out of the land of Egypt, as Adonai ordered Moshe and the people of Israel. So they start taking the census and they go through all the different descendants and the tribes. And the reason this is important, because it will also show us who the Messiah is and where he came from, but it also helps people know where they belong in this group, like what tribe they belong to. And that structure is so vital at this time because everything revolves around that. So uh, this is a census for fighting, obviously. So, they want the males that are old enough to fight. So jumping down to verse 63, it says, these are the ones counted by Moshe and Eleazar the Cohen, who took a census of the people of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. But there was not a man among them who had also been included in the census of Moshe and Aaron the Cohen when they enumerated the people of Israel in the Sinai desert, because Adonai had said to them, they will surely die in the desert, so that there was not left even one of them except Caleb the son of Joseph and Joshua son of Nun. So those were the only two. And remember, they went on the scouting party and they gave a good response. So they weren't included in the ones that God was going to let die out in the wilderness. So the final 11 chapters of Numbers basically deals with battles, settling, and then moving and moving again, and these constant kind of battles. So the new generation was more faithful, more passionate about their mission, and more willing to put their lives on the line. They learned from their years in the desert, and they changed. They became more faithful to the God of the universe. So the Lord says, take account of the Israelite community, all the families that came up out of Egypt. And we see that there were descendants of Reuben and Korah that remain. There, there were survivors because their clan names are listed. So the clan of Korah went on to be the singers at the temple. So even though they took out that family, that tribe, or not the whole tribe, but that family unit, the clan itself still existed. There were still survivors from that. So the chapter ends with the reminder that all that remained of the males who were under the age of 20 were Joshua and Caleb. 600,000 males had died during those 40 years in the wilderness. Imagine. It's beyond comprehension to imagine that. But Moses assigned land to each tribal leader, and then the tribal leader was supposed to distribute that land among the clans in his tribe. And that's why earlier in a video we went through the different family structure, clans, tribes, and that kind of thing in the Bible. And that's why that's important, because that's how land's going to be distributed. So let's jump to chapter 27. And this is one of those two that you probably heard a little bit of a story about it, but once he starts doing all the land, then you have some daughters that couldn't get land because there weren't any sons. Their dad didn't have any sons. So let's jump into that. We won't read the whole thing because, or yeah, we will of this one. There's only 22 verses. So one day a petition was presented by the daughters of Zephlohad. Mala, Noah, Hagla, Miklah, and Tizah. Their father Zelophehad was a descendant of Hephner, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, son of Joseph. These women stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the tribal leaders, and the entire community at the entrance of the tabernacle. Our father died in the wilderness, they said. He was not among Korah's followers who rebelled against the Lord. He died because of his own sin, but he had no sons. Why should the name of our father disappear from his clan just because he has no sons? Give us property along with the rest of our relatives. So Moses brought their case before the Lord, and the Lord replied to Moses, the claim of the daughters of Zelophehad is legitimate. You must give them a grant of land along with their father's relatives. Assign them the property that would have been given to their father. And give the following instructions to the people of Israel. If a man dies and has no son, then give his inheritance to his daughters. If he has no daughter either, transfer his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, give his inheritance to his father's brothers. If his father had no brothers, give his inheritance to the nearest relative in his clan. This is a legal requirement for the people of Israel, just as the Lord commanded Moses. So sometimes we like to say, well, look at some of the things back then, it's a male patriarchy. They ran everything and stuff. God fixed something in their society for women to make sure they were lifted up and put on an equal basis. And that's important. Now, not on everything. I'm not arguing that point. But land ownership and being without land would have been a huge deal for them. So one day the Lord said to Moses, climb one of the mountains east of the river and look out over the land I've given the people of Israel. After you have seen it, you will die like your brother Aaron. For you both rebelled against my instructions in the wilderness of Zin. When the people of Israel rebelled, you failed to demonstrate my holiness to them at the waters. Then Moses said to the Lord, O Lord, you are the God who gives breath to all creatures. Please appoint a new man as a leader for the community. Give them someone who will guide them wherever they go and will lead them into battle. So the community of the Lord will not be like sheep without a shepherd. The Lord replied, take Joshua, son of Nun, who has the Spirit in him, and lay your hands on him. Present him to Eleazar the priest before the whole community and publicly commission him to lead the people. Transfer some of your authority to him so the whole community of Israel will obey him. When direction from the Lord is needed, Joshua will stand before Eleazar the priest, who will use the Urim, one of the sacred lots cast before the Lord, to determine his will. This is how Joshua and the rest of the community of Israel will determine everything they should do. So Moses did as the Lord commanded. He presented Joshua to Eleazar the priest and the whole community. Moses laid his hands on him and commissioned him to lead the people, just as the Lord had commanded through Moses. So the law is more defined, and how a law is to be carried out is explained a little bit more in depth there. So he'll define something, and then he'll take the time to expand it so we understand it better. The more important laws and principles are being repeated and reinforced for the new generation of Hebrew too, because remember, all of those died, so you've got a lot of new people that weren't around when the law was given, or at least weren't old enough. So the family headed by Zelophehad has a problem. He left no sons. So the reasoning is that their father had not participated in the great apostasy of Korah, so he died under the same curse as all the other people who had left Egypt. So it wasn't really his fault necessarily. So since all the other families whose men had committed the same sin were not being denied rights to land in Canaan because their fathers or elders had sons, why should their father's family be denied land merely because he had no sons? So the Lord says that the daughters may inherit the land that they would normally been given to the sons. Let's see here. Israelis have no right from a spiritual perspective to give 1 square inch of Israel away to anybody. Every time there's been a peace agreement of some kind that gave away land, I've supported it. I've been wrong because clearly, as we see in the Bible, we're not supposed to give any of that land away. Also, we don't own that land. It's being given to his people, but he still retains ownership of it. So we can't give away God's property. It's pretty easy. So when we read of the end times prophecy, it says a new temple will be built in Jerusalem, and then the Antichrist will put an image of himself inside the holy place, the Holy of Holies, and demand that he be worshiped as God. There's little difference between allowing God's enemies to live on his sanctified land and permitting God's grand enemy to be worshiped in his temple. It is one more step closer to it. So the lamb was to be passed on to a son because the son carried the family name forward, obviously. And Joshua was to be the military leader of Israel, not the mediator like Moses was. So this chapter ends with Moses and Joshua standing before Eleazar, the high priest, and the whole community watching while Joshua is ordained, basically. It's done before all the people, so they will recognize Joshua as God's choice and will submit to his leadership. Because sometimes we put somebody in charge and say, oh, well, yeah, I did it late at night. It's like, no, do it in front of everybody. Keep it legitimate and authentic and transparent. And then it makes it really easy to follow the new person because we kind of understand a little bit better. Some pastors like to make decisions at night and are in the dark and just kind of institute them. And it's not always the best way to go. But that's chapter 26 and 27. We'll do 28 and 29 next time. God bless. Love God, love people, and change the world.